Thanks for being here for the SSL Roundup, everybody. And Carly, I did see there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you had a chance to see it.
I did, and so I was hoping that maybe someone could respond to it. I goofed up my timer when I was like trying to look at the chat and answer. Um,
It looks like
but
Karen Walters is all over it. Thanks,
oh,
Karen.
okay.
We'll let you
And
move along
Jamie,
then.
Jamie, I can follow up with you later also. But yeah, thanks for that question. And keep the questions coming, even if it seems like, oh, is this off topic? Who
Nope,
cares?
this
Just
is the
throw it in
place.
there. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, well,
Um,
yeehaw. Let's talk about SSLOs. Yeah.
Yes. So this is our last hour-long session. After this, we'll have a quick closing and send you on your way this afternoon. We will spend about an hour talking about SSLOs, single set of learning objectives. This is definitely one of those pinch points with IET. So whether you are brand new to this topic or you have, seeing SSLOs as a trigger for you because it's so difficult. The point of this presentation is really to break it down and make it seem like a much easier process. That is the goal for this session. And in terms of the presentation, I love a good theme, you guys. So definitely picture me with a lasso riding whatever animal that is. And the idea is we're using the phrase roundup in kind of two different ways. So we're going to explore how to bring together, how to round up your IET team. We shared at the beginning of this afternoon, what hat you wear. We're going to look again at some of the different roles, common roles in an IET team and how they work on different steps of the IET process, including SSLOs. And then we're going to switch gears and we're really going to examine SSLOs, first start with a quick definition, and then I'm going to round up, or I have rounded up some examples. It's really helpful to see what does an SSLO look like? How is it structured? Looking at different careers also, just so you can have some great examples. So that is what we're going to do in this session. So we're going to start with this topic of rounding up your IET team. So at the beginning of the afternoon, we had the pumpkin and the cowboy hat and some different roles. There was, I think, 4 choices on there, but actually there's a whole bunch of different roles that are common to IET work. This first row are kind of the most obvious ones, right? You're going to need to have that instructor to teach the career pathway class. There's also going to be some type of coordinator, whether it's an ABE manager or maybe you come from a large site or this is a regional offering where there's somebody in the specific career pathway coordinator role. Another common role is navigator, and sometimes it's a very formal position, or sometimes it's more of an informal role that somebody takes on to act as the employment or the wraparound supports for our students. We know that they have many, many needs. I feel like all of this kind of aligns with what Heather was sharing with those quality indicators. The navigator plays a really important role in IET work. Then we move into some other positions that are common to IET. You need to be aligned with a training organization. It could be a college or a community-based organization. Think like a Goodwill or a Hired or another program near you that is a training partner. Or you can work with a local employer. There could be, the head of that business, someone in HR, someone who is the hiring manager. And if you can have them on your IET team, then you can really find out what that employer is looking for at an entry level and beyond. Um, this list is definitely not exhaustive. There's many other roles that people can play in the IET team. I listed a few here. There could be a regional transition coordinator who is helping to plan, design, implement your IET program. You could be collaborating with workforce development agencies, an employment counselor. It could be a member of, your ABE team whose focus is really on intake or on outreach. Those can play really important roles in gathering students and preparing your IET program. So lots of different roles. And the idea is on this on these steps at each part of the process, each of those team members are engaged and involved. All the steps that Heather talked about: research and assess, design and plan, develop and implement, evaluate and improve. And sometimes it might feel like that's a bit of a stretch, but I would say that yes, all team members can actively participate in each of those steps. Is it going to look different for each team member? Yes, of course, because some people have more expertise, some people aren't available. It's not going to be like a one size fits all here. When we get into SSLOs, we're going to see, sometimes you're leaning on one team member over another, but they all have a say and they all are actively involved. And SSLOs, creating them, writing them, revising them, are part of that, where all team members can be involved. So we're going to move on and kind of just get into SSLOs, starting with the definition. So SSLO is an abbreviation, one more that we have in ABE, and it stands for Single Set of Learning Objectives. So I like to take a step back and just remind myself, what is a learning objective? It's a statement that describes what the student will be able to do after instruction, after a lesson, after a series of lessons, at the end of your credential class that you're holding. So they usually kind of follow this structure. Students will be able to, which is a statement that can be abbreviated, SWBAT, and then you're going to add in the thing that they're going to be able to do, right? So I have one example on this slide. Students will be able to analyze academic text to determine the main idea. It's short, it's clear, it's to the point, it's obvious in this statement. What are students going to be able to do after this series of lessons or after this class? It says it right there in the learning objective, right? So that's a great place to start. But when we get into IET programming, now we're talking about SSLOs, a single set of learning objective, and it has to do more because there's a lot more to it. So in a learning objective for an IET program, you've got to involve all three of these required components: the adult ed and literacy, workforce preparation, and workforce training. All three of them have to be integrated, right? So you're not going to have an SSLO that's focused on like, what are the adult ed and literacy standards that they're working on, and a separate one for workforce training and a separate one for workforce preparation. They need to be integrated in each of the SSLOs. And then in addition, this needs to be contextualized. If you are working with a healthcare pathway class, the SSLO, we should be able to read it and understand that that's a CNA specific SSLO, or it's for manufacturing, or whatever the career field is. You're not going to have something kind of so general that we could use it for any type of career field. So there's just a lot that needs to cram into what is essentially like a very long sentence, or, a long learning objective. So that can be a challenge. And I would say the first thing maybe to focus on is to figure out common themes for your SSLOs. And I like to usually refer to them as buckets, but this is like a country western theme, you guys, for this session. So we're going to call them barrels here in the picture. So you can be thinking about whatever career pathway IET class you're working on. And there are some very common barrels or some common themes that fit for virtually any career pathway. And I've listed some on this slide. So this first one is safety. Whether it is something related to construction or manufacturing, maybe there's tools that you're using on the job and students have to know how to use them safely. That's one way it could look. But it could also mean food safety, or if you are working with children, with elderly clients, adults with disabilities, youth with disabilities, there might be some safety regulations and protocol that you have to follow to be successful in the job. So safety is one of those themes that across many different types of career pathways, oftentimes there can be an SSLO focused on safety. Another common example here for a common theme is vocabulary. I've worked with different types of career pathway classes in the past, from food service to IT, and a lot of any career pathway class is focused on what are the key terms, what do you need to know, what are we developing in that career pathway class. So vocabulary, concepts, terms, what do you need to know, that could be a theme for an SSLO. I have a couple other ideas on this slide, things that you kind of commonly see on job applications and also, resumes and things like that. These professional skills of teamwork, communication, customer service across many, many different fields, you see those coming up. And if you think about it, these are the skills that we want our students to have when they show up at the interview, when they show up for the first day on the job. So if these are things that you are developing and working on in your class, that could be one of the themes, one of the barrels for your SSLOs. So just a couple examples there that are kind of generally go-tos. But I would say that one of the harder things to do is kind of to look at, the 6-week class or the 8-week class or however long your program is. You might have these examples, these themes, but you might have many, many more because you are passing lots of information, a certification, you're teaching many things in this class. So how do you kind of boil it down or narrow it down with your IET to just 4 or 5 or 6 themes for your SSLOs? And that can be kind of a difficult thing to do. So there's a couple strategies that I'd like to walk through for you. This first strategy, in terms of like trying to figure out what those big barrels are, is to look at the course design. Now, you can use this if this is a class that you've been running for a while, maybe as an adult career pathways, and you're like exploring whether it could be considered IET. So if you have the curriculum or you have an outline ready, you can use that to help you figure out, what are the major components of this class? Think about, what are you focusing on? What are the key skills? What I have in this image is actually from the Atlas website. We have many, many adult career pathways curriculum. We have a library on there where you can find curricula from various career pathways. And this is from a paraprofessional class that's happening in the state of Minnesota. And this outline kind of starts with, okay, the student has to register, they have to get enrolled, we show them how to use Zoom. It kind of starts with like the basics of like how the class is going to work. And then it seems like, as you get about halfway down, it really gets into the major components of what are we going to teach you about being a paraprofessional. And so I'm, kind of an outsider perspective here because I've never taught paraprofessional, but I looked at this outline and the arrows are pointing to things where I'm like, I'm thinking that these are probably important skills that you want students to acquire through the course of this paraprofessional class. So I've identified, I think there's 6 that I pointed to, right? Another way of kind of narrowing down your barrels in defining your SSLO themes is to look at job descriptions. And I enjoy doing this. I love the idea of working backwards. If you start with the job description and like, what do students need to have to enter the job market? And then make sure that your program and your curriculum aligns to that, that's a really great way to design your IET program. But here I've pulled up a job description just from a local school district, but it would be great to look at not just one, but a couple, right? Maybe that entry level and maybe one step above, just so you can help prepare students for beyond an entry level. Um, Again, we're kind of going to stick with paraprofessional for the next couple slides. So this is a paraprofessional um, job description that I just found online. One thing that I noticed in this list, there was something that was in qualifications, and then it was listed again under responsibilities. Here I have an arrow pointing to it, focused on communication, right? So I'm kind of thinking if it's on there twice, that maybe it's important. So that might be a good theme for an SSLO. If you want to prepare your paraprofessional students with strong professional communication, that could be one of the categories. And then I read the others on this list, and here I'm pointing out the ones that I thought seemed good, right? Maybe something related to safety and CPR and first aid, assist in the development and implementation of appropriate activities and environment for school-age children. And then I picked out assist in maintaining program records. So this is a great first start, whether you print off the job description, go through and highlight things that you think are important, but that's coming from maybe the ABE side, right? Then what you want to do with this resource, this job description, is take it to your employer or your training partner and have a discussion. Like, are these the most important skills that people need to have? You might ask, did we overlook something? Maybe I thought, oh, that doesn't seem very important. It's listed, but it's not a big deal. But the employer might say, actually, we really need people to be more prepared with these skills. So, use it as a dialogue starter. And especially with this strategy, you would kind of want to lean into your employer or your training partner in terms of like who in your IET team could really help in this circumstance. So that's just another strategy to be defining like what are those key SSLO themes. I have a couple other resources that I wanted to share in terms of like where you can go to use career data to develop kind of major themes for an SSLO. This first one is called ONET. And if you've been around a little while, you're going to remember ONET. When I started in ABE in 2005, I remember sitting down with students with an ONET book, a paper book. It was about 3 inches thick, like sitting down and kind of like a huge dictionary and searching for different jobs. So I don't even think they print the paper books anymore. It's all online, which makes it really easy to quickly search for a career cluster or a career title. We're sticking with paraprofessional right here. So when I typed in paraprofessional in the ONET, this one came up. It's called teaching assistants, but you can see here in terms of like other job titles, it's listed. So this is one way where it's kind of analyzing what are the skills, what are the work activities. So if you're trying to do some research on this position or this career field, ONET is a great resource. I did want to point out that they also have this option here where it says easy read. If you click on it, it will take that information focused on, whatever career you're researching, and it will change the reading level. I don't think it said exactly what grade level this is, but it changes it. So I just thought that might be a great resource to use in class if you're doing some career exploration. Um, so that is a great resource. This is using ONET. Another good thing about ONET is it literally has every job imaginable on there, right? It's got thousands of them. This other resource that I wanted to share is called Competency Model, and it's at careeronestop.org. Well, this was maybe in spring of 2024. I did a webinar on SSLOs with Julie and went in a little bit more detailed on competency models, but I wanted to point it out today. Here is a list of different career clusters. The one thing you'll notice is this isn't an exhaustive list. It's not super long. They don't have education listed here, so I'm not able to pull up kind of a comparison for the paraprofessional, but I did just want to show what this website does. So when you click on a position or a career field, you're going to see kind of like this Lego-like structure where if you start at the bottom, it says personal effectiveness competencies, then it goes to tier 2 academic competencies, workplace competencies, and above. So it's kind of explaining or identifying the skills that are necessary for that field. And then when you click on the full report, it's usually like 10 or 12 pages long, and it's going to define the specific skills. So if it says, teamwork is critical for somebody who's working in food and beverage service, if you click on the report, it's going to go much more detailed on what that looks like. You're going to see some examples. It's almost too detailed. It's very thorough, but if you are in that stage where you're researching the position, the career pathway that you're working on for your IET, both of those things are great resources. And again, it's not just, oh, we looked at it and we, used our ABE lens to kind of like understand it and analyze it. Both of these things, like the other ones I mentioned, the job descriptions and the course design, you want to bring that to your employer or your training partner and use that as like a place to start a discussion about, are these the important skills? Because you really want to identify those together. So at this point, once you kind of have your barrels identified, your key SSLO themes, your key themes for the course that you are working on, then you want to go to that website that Brad showed us earlier today, mnabe.org. And once you go to the transitions tab and find the IET section, you're going to want to look for the single set of learning objectives. It's a form or a template that looks like a chart that you're going to need to fill in for IET approval. And there's also resources connected to that, including an SSLO rubric. And we're going to look at the rubric a little bit together. The SSLOs are submitted to Atlas, and I'm the person who reviews them, evaluates them, and the way that I evaluate SSLOs is using this rubric right here that's on the screen. So there's 3 basic criteria that I'm looking at when I evaluate SSLOs, and the criteria are over on the left. It's got to have all 3 of the required components of IET. I think we've listed them a few times this afternoon. There's got to be adult basic literacy, workforce preparation, and occupational skills and knowledge. And it's not enough to just have them, they need to be interconnected and contextualize. So again, you're not going to have like one SSLO that's focused on literacy and one on workforce prep. They're going to be together. The other 2 criteria that I'm looking at include clarity. So that's the conditions under which the learner will demonstrate competency. That needs to be clearly stated in your SSLO. And then the last one is it needs to have a measurable outcomes. And we'll see some examples, so you'll kind of see different ways that you would record how those things are being measured. But that is the basic SSLO rubric. Okay, so you've got your main themes, you've got your barrels, and now below is the template. So it's this chart with all of these boxes. And I'm going to kind of model the way that you can go about breaking this stuff down and documenting the different pieces of your SSLO. And we're going to stick with this paraprofessional focus. And I was thinking, gosh, professional communication, that's got to be pretty key for this type of job. So we're going to use that as our theme for this SSLO. So here are all these boxes that we have to fill in to document what's happening in the class. How are we preparing students for working in this field? And then at the end of that, we're going to put all the words together and come up with an SSLO. But this is a lot to cover. We're going to start over on the left-hand side with the category called Workforce Skills and Competencies. So the way I think about that is this question here. What are the tasks on the job that involve whatever your theme is? Here it's professional communication. And again, not an expert on paraprofessional because I haven't taught it or coordinated it or anything necessarily, but I'm thinking, if you're working as a para, that's kind of what you do every day, all day, right? You're communicating with students of different age groups and abilities. You're talking to your manager. You might be communicating with the principal, parents. It could be online communication or electronic communication. It could be oral. That's what they do all day. Then the next column is focused on adult literacy skills and competencies. So there you want to ask yourself, well, what's happening in the class to develop whatever skill you're focused on? So what's happening in the para class to develop professional communication? So this is going to be very specific to what's going on in the class, how are they practicing that? I just tried to come up with some examples that sounded like they would work. Maybe it's sending a weekly email to your instructor, making sure that there's a subject line, an opening, a closing, complete sentences. Maybe you're talking through like your goals for the week and what you're going to be working on, and it's a way of practicing professional communication. Another option, that I thought would be kind of fun would and would practice professional communication is to have maybe some common scenarios that a paraprofessional would encounter on maybe a daily basis. and have different playing dialogues with students where maybe they take turns being the student and the staff person and can practice that professional communication. Maybe it's something entirely different, right? But you're going to document here, what are we doing? What are we doing in class to practice those skills? The next two columns are related to content standards and those competencies, and they're a little bit more straightforward, I would say. For adult education content standards, that's when you're going to want to grab your blue book if you have a paper one handy, or I prefer the electronic copy of the CCRS Blue Book. I have that favorited. And the easiest way that I know to, narrow down the different content standards is to do Control F. And that's what I did for this example. I'm trying to align here with professional communication. So I hit Control F, put in communication, and it just kind of helps me narrow down what is a very big resource. I think it might be like 160 pages or something, and it narrows it down for me. So then I can look at some of the different places and decide, and it could be more than one content standard. You could have several anchors. You could have several different skills and sub-skills here. But the ones that I thought were really a good fit for this is it says you need to differentiate between contexts that call for formal English when you're presenting ideas, or I'm thinking about working as a paraprofessional, you're talking to a parent or you're talking to your supervisor. That would be more formal English, right? As opposed to informal discourse, maybe you're in the hallway with students and you're using slang or you're joking around, or it's just a more informal setting, and so you're practicing those skills. And then the next one to the right there, you need to adapt to those different settings. That seemed like a perfect fit, right, for this SSLO focused on professional communication. The last column is called Workforce Preparation Skills and Competencies. And that's where you are going to align this SSLO to ACES-TIF content standards. There are 6 categories in ACES-TIF, and one of them is called effective communication. So that seemed like a good place to start for this. So I narrowed it down. The link I have here takes you to the TIF at a glance, which is 12 pages. And then here's skill 1. Students will be able to engage positively and actively with individuals in both one-on-one and team settings to accomplish goals. That seemed like a great fit for what I was trying to do here with the para and the professional communication. Below, I've listed some sub-skills, and you can, define it even further which of those sub-skills would be a good fit. But that's what you're going to do to start filling in the template before you get to just kind of shoving all of this together and creating one statement or one SSLO. So that's maybe the hardest part, but that's where we're at now. And I would say this is something where you can definitely use some of the technology aids that we have. I'm not somebody that likes to just wordsmith for hours in a group or something. Gather this information, use your team, rely on the employer partner or the training partner for column 1 with workforce skills and competencies. The instructor or the coordinator is going to be somebody you lean on for some of these other categories. And then, start to construct that SSLO. And so here is one that I developed to try to mash together all of that information on the last slide. So it's a long sentence. Students will be able to demonstrate professional communication skills by adapting tone, language, and style to engage positively and appropriately with students, teachers, and parents in a variety of school settings. So it's a mouthful, it's a long sentence, but hopefully it kind of accurately reflects what I had on that last slide with the different categories, but it is missing something technically according to the rubric. It's missing that bit about clarity and measurable outcome. And those are easy to add, and sometimes it needs to be a separate sentence, but I was able to just shove some ideas here. And so here is my next version 2.0 of this SSLO once I've added some clarity and measurable outcome. So now it's students will be able to demonstrate professional communication by participating in 10 small group discussions that simulate common paraprofessional interactions where they will be evaluated by their teacher using a communication rubric on adapting tone, language, and style to engage positively and appropriately with students, teachers, and parents. Whew, okay. I thought on the last slide that was a mouthful, but this is very long, but it has everything we need now. We have all three of the required IET components. We have clarity and the measurable outcome. These are tough, but hopefully looking at the strategies from this presentation of kind of first narrowing down, picking your themes, filling it in, using your team to help you, and then just mashing them all together. Those are the strategies I'd like to suggest. So now we don't want to just settle for looking at that one. Now I wanted to round up a few more SSLOs and we're going to look at them. All of these SSLOs that I'm going to show were submitted in the last program year. So these are ones that have been evaluated by the rubric and meet all of the requirements. And these are all from documented and approved IET programs. They're so long. So you could always take a picture, but this is a resource that's in the participant folder. So you're going to have access to this later. These three SSLOs are from a manufacturing IET program that was from Department of Corrections. So they all start with students will be able to, one is focused on computer skills. There's another one about work safety, another one focused on blueprints, but they all have the three components, clarity, and a measurable outcome. Whether it's 100% of assignments or passing a proctored North Star test at 85% or above. That is helping to meet all of the criteria on these SSLOs. Any thoughts about what we're seeing here?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat unless Heather wants to chime in about it's a lot of things, but it's what they need to know.
Yeah, Patsy, thanks. It is a lot. It's a mouthful, but it really will let the students know what they have to do and how well they have to do it. And then it lets the instructor know exactly what to be teaching and not something else, right? I just have a question about this where it says on the one in the far right, students will need to satisfactorily complete 100% of class assignments. I question what's satisfactory. Is that like every
Yeah,
grading? So that would be my only question. Like, I don't know what that means. So
sure, yeah. And yes, that, and so there maybe could be a little more clarity, whether it's pass fail, or, I think about if something comes in and, it's unsatisfactory, you would make them go back and redo it. And so maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. It's these are kind of, I would say, gold standards for SSLOs. It's really hard to be perfect on these, and I don't think we need to worry about being perfect, right? But these are pretty strong. They're clearly defining some learning outcomes in a very complex IET program. So let's look at the next examples here. So we want to give you, oh, I went too far. Okay, a different type of career field right now. This one is from Microsoft Office Specialist IET program. So a different type of class. The first SSLO is focused on Microsoft PowerPoint and what they need to complete in there and how they do it on context projects and how it's going to be evaluated. So that's getting at the clarity and the measurable outcome. The next one is focused on Microsoft Excel skills. What are the things that students are going to be able to know and do at the end of the course? It is just so hard to narrow it down, but these two are doing a pretty good job. And of course, just to kind of restate something from another slide, when you submit your IET paperwork, you're going to have 4 to 6 SSLOs. It's not 20, it's not 10. You might cover a lot of different content, but you're going to have to narrow it down to the 4 to 6 SSLOs that are most important. Here is another one focused on floor covering IET, so another area that's more trade specific. I told the main contact that I had who submitted these, I was like, oh, I love how these SSLOs start. This idea of considering the floor covering lab as the job site and fellow students as coworkers. I just love like the way that frames, and that's exactly what we're doing when we have labs, when you're doing role plays, when you are having students practice these things. And I told the person, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really great way to phrase it. And I'm totally going to be stealing that. So that's just a good way to be thinking about how are students going to show that they're competent. In a lot of these career pathways, it's, actually doing a lab, standing up, working through the actions and doing it hands-on. So feel free to have that be reflected in the SSLOs. So definitely long, long sentences here for SSLOs. It's not easy, but it can absolutely be done. So now, now that you have seen those amazing examples and you have them in the participant folder, so you can always reference them in the future, I had to end in a very cheesy way and say, it's time to round up your IET team and then wrangle up some SSLOs of your own. Get that, you guys? Get the rope, lasso. Hopefully that broke things down a little bit for you and you feel like, okay, I can do this because I know you all can. So we are going to go ahead and end this recording and then we'll jump into our closing.